Hey guys, it's Ashes. Been trying to record this a couple times, keep having issues with my audio. So hopefully this is the best audio that I can do for right now. Sorry if you heard that, I was moving my glass on my table. My microphones aren't the best. But anyways, today I'm going to be doing a Misty tutorial based off of her original design, which was requested by, I think their username says Steamer, the Steam Train, I think. I don't know if that's the same username they had when they made the request. That was like 4 months ago, so don't really know. But if you're still checking out my videos, here's your tutorial. Yeah, so I found this reference image online. Don't know if it's official artwork or not, so if it does belong to somebody specifically, I'd be happy to put them in the description if anyone pointed it out. But yeah, I wanted to use a full body reference, and it's a little hard to get one from the show, like that's got her in like a usable pose. So we're going with this. Anyways, so sorry, been a long day. I've broken it down into a height chart, just because a lot of times when you're drawing, especially from something specific, if you mess up your proportions, that can be a real giveaway. If you're trying to make it look accurate, that can be a real giveaway. If for some reason she was like 4 heads high instead of like 5.5 or 5.25. So yeah, these black lines are just kind of to give you an idea of top of the head, bottom of the head. So that's another head length, so on and so on. You can see the black one here lines up about with her waist. This one's about halfway in her thighs. More than halfway up her shins. This one here is a little low to the ankles. The ankle would be more like 4.25 or 4.75, I mean, head length. So you can kind of break things down from there. In this instance, for example, the bottom of the shoe would probably be roughly 5.25 heads. The red one here, meaning that it's about half a head length, which in this case lines up with her her chest, her pelvis, her knees, and this one doesn't line up with anything, and this one's a little lower than her shoe. Sorry, again, been a day. But moving on from that, we can go into the kind of stick figure. So not everybody likes using these stick figures. I think that when you're first starting out, a lot of tutorials use them, which is why I'm putting them in, just because even though it's not everybody's preference, if they're like a staple of this stuff, they've got to be useful for some people. Plus, when it comes to making your own poses and figuring that out, I think that having the stick figure can help just to kind of give you an idea of how your pose is going to go. So in this case, we started with this. Basically, it's the circle is most of her head, and then there's just like this little bit that kind of comes off for like her cheek down to her chin. It's not a particularly big kind of body. Like you can kind of see here, like this and this. Like her head is about as wide as the rest of her body. But it's cartoons for you. These obviously aren't going to be accurate to like the real length of what her arms would be if they were like just flat out like that, because they're going to be a little bit angled due to the way her pose is. This arm would probably be a little bit like farther back than some of the other stuff, so this is going to get what would be called foreshortened. If you're not familiar with that term, basically it just has to do with like if you have like a hand, there's a really poorly drawn hand right now, and it's like facing you, then you're not going to see the arm back like behind it. You might just see somebody's like face here, and then like their shoulder and stuff like that. Because then if you did draw the arm, then their hand's in a completely different position, and now their hand's lower down. There we go. So that's basically the thing. Like this is way shorter than I think it would normally be. But that part of the lesson done. These kind of things just can be helpful because then, like, you know, you go from here to here, and then maybe you wanted your hand to be here, maybe you wanted your hand to be out like that, stuff like that. That's why the stick figures can be helpful. Some people, when they do feet too, they might just go with a flat, kind of really flat triangle shape, which that can be, you know, whatever preference you have. I personally like to do this shape because it's not super difficult and it can give you a better idea of like the mass of the shoe. So like I like to add this little bit like kind of there. Next step would be cylinder kind of shapes, or just like more 3D shapes, although I don't really do them. Some people still have like this kind of stuff and stuff like that. And it looks kind of more like those like wood mannequin things that they sell, which the ones I've bought, usually terrible to use, but there's probably some decent ones out there. But yeah, basically just giving her some mass. You want her hip here is kind of like this way a bit. You can kind of see like her body's not going straight down. It's got like a curve to it. And that's just kind of a basic thing from poses in general. A lot of times it's good to have like, I forget what like the actual terms for this kind of stuff is, but there's like kind of an S shape that just is generally a lot more pleasing when you make like poses and things. Unless you want someone to be like rigid for whatever reason, maybe they're in like the military or something like that. You just want to be very aware of things. In this case, we've got the rest of her body mass on. Got, you know, she's got a very narrow waist, which is just the design in general. She's very thin. I mean, she has some muscle mass here, and you'll see when we get to the line stage, there's like a little bit of a mass to like her shoulders, for example, which I would attribute to the fact that she's a swimmer. I don't know if it's just the way it was designed for that specific reference photo I was using or not, but I mean, makes sense to me. We've got her ears, and these lines here are kind of to give you an idea of the angle of her face and some of the proportions. So this line is like the middle of her face. So like her nose would be there. And these kinds of lines are meant to kind of give you, now some people on certain kind of stuff will have this be more like an eyebrow kind of line because it's a little bit high. But for the style in Pokemon, this would be like the top of her eyes and the bottom of her eyes. And then like be something like that. So it just depends on what you're doing. For this specific example, it's the top and the bottom of her eyes. Moving up, let me get rid of the height reference so that we're not as cluttered. And now we've just got on a lot of details. So a lot of the hair, for example, you can just draw a triangle and then cut it out with like another triangle, etc., etc. A lot of it's just kind of triangular. She's got really angular shapes to her hair. You can see it here too. It's kind of a triangle thing going on. There, that makes a little more sense. And like I said, just do some cutouts. And also a little bit of a triangle shape to her mouth. And her nose. Her nose is just like a less than sign. Eyes are fairly long and narrow. She's got suspenders, she's got her tank top, she's got high-waisted, relatively short shorts with the rolled-up cuffs. She's got, her shoes are kind of, I think that they look more like a Converse than like a sneaker high top. They look more like a Converse high top to me, personally, as if these were rolled over, as opposed to just being like a chunky kind of squishy kind of mass to the back of like the ankle. But that's kind of down to a preference. And that's the basics that you would need. Oh, the ear too. The ears have this sort of backwards 3 shape. So you can kind of play with that how you want. And then let's just move along into the lines. And you can see here, like I said about the mass, there's a bit more mass to her shoulders. There's some separation between some of this stuff. Just kind of depends on what you want to do. Like here, sometimes it can make someone look a little too buff, but based off of the reference I was working on, that's kind of how it went. Let's see. There's not too much to her hands because of the pose that they're in. if you want to draw someone with their hands in a different pose, you'd have to probably go to a specific hand tutorial. This is just more of her general design and her like proportions. I'm not sure if my mic is picking that up. There's like a high pitched noise. That might be the water heater. It's just in the next room over. Sorry about that. But yeah, she got her eyebrows. We got some eyelashes. Yeah, the shoelaces, rather than being like that crisscross that you actually have for shoelaces, they just have these lines like that. And I think that's just because it simplifies her design so that it's not adding all these extra details to animate for like a split second. Yeah. And we've got some lines on her knees, some pockets, some belt loops, her belt button, or not belt button, but her shorts button and a belly button. A lot of buttons. And then this would kind of be like where the seam is for her shorts. And lastly, the colors. I picked these colors from the reference image I used. I just ignored the shadows stuff because I didn't think that they were all that relevant for this, just considering that a lot of times in the cartoon there's not going to be a ton of cell shading. Again, with animation, the less details you add, the less you have to constantly draw and animate. But you can do how you want, and I'll show you too. I did a separate drawing using what I learned from this tutorial, and I did add my own kind of shading and made some of my own adjustments to color and to her design. But yeah, you can kind of see she's got these down here are kind of like an electric bolt kind of a thing, so that's why they're yellow. I don't know if that's really the intent or not, but that's just how I see them. And then everything else you can kind of just see the basic colors here. And over here, like I said, this is like where I picked the colors from the original reference, and I just kind of placed them near where I was going to be using them, so I knew what I was doing. Her eyes, real quick, I think her eyes are going to be like bluer than what I have here. It's just that the one I pulled is kind of this sort of teal blue sort of color, but I would say they're more blue than green from what I could find. And I think that they looked a little bit lighter in my reference photo, but that might be because I didn't use highlights or shading for this tutorial. Just because on a human body, there's a lot that's gonna kind of get in there. So you can kind of, and it depends on your light source all the time. So, because if the light source is coming from over here, then all the shading is gonna be on this side of the body. Whereas if it's coming from over there, going to be on this side of the body. It's coming from up top. There's going to be a lot of shading down here. It's all relative. But going off of that, this is the example that I was pointing out, is that after putting together, after working on this tutorial and prepping for it and kind of getting an idea of her proportions and her style, I did my own drawing of Misty just to kind of show you how, once you get the idea of what you're doing, you make it your own. In this case, I took a lot of the angularity out of her hair just because I wanted to make it softer and more cutesy. So I've still got the same basic shape of her hair. I still got her, still got the same kind of bangs that she had. Still has the same kind of bit that sticks off in her little ponytail. But like I said, I softened a lot of it. And with my own lighting, I chose to have lighting coming in from here. So there's a lot of like softer kind of lighting along her hair, her cheeks, and her clothes. But yeah, you get the point. I made some adjustments to her eyes. So just kind of play with it. Play with any of the stuff that you're trying to learn. Copying and tracing is honestly really helpful when you're starting to learn. Just always be careful to not say that it's your own original work when you're copying or tracing, because it's purely an educational thing. And a lot of times, I would say, especially if it comes to sharing it on social media, for example, it can be very tricky. So if you're not making your own work, just be very careful of how you phrase what you say if you post anything about it. because like I said, tracing, copying, drawing reference and things, it's very helpful as an educational tool. You don't have to freehand everything. That's something you might kind of pick up at some point. This thought that a real artist is going to freehand everything and just know what they're doing. That's not how it works. The program I use has 3D models that I will pose and trace over to get the shape of what my character is doing. Or if I don't use that, I might find a reference image of somebody doing the pose that I want, and I might trace over that and then make adjustments from there. So, yeah. Sorry for going on this little tangent, but it's just something that I think a lot of people need to learn when they're getting into art. Is that tracing and references are a great educational tool. So don't discount that. But yeah, that's it for my tutorial. If you have any questions, if you have any feedback for this tutorial, feel free to leave a comment down below. Also too, if you have any suggestions for my next video, other content you want to see me do, whether it be you want to see me draw something specific, you want to see more tutorials about different subjects, or maybe you drew using one of my tutorials, or drew something based off something that I made. Feel free to comment or even reach out to me on my social media. I'm on Twitter and on Instagram at ashestheartist.com. Not .com, just ashestheartist. Sorry, it's been a day. I've had a lot of issues with recording this tutorial. But yeah, ashestheartist is my my handle for Twitter and Instagram. Feel free to tweet me or tag me and stuff. I'd be happy to see what you're making. Yeah, and that's it, and I will see you guys in the next video. While I don't make a lot of content regularly, if you are interested in seeing more of my content, then make sure to subscribe just so that when I do put stuff out, it'll let you know. Bye!